How's it going, guys? I hope you guys are having a great week. So I'm back today with a what do we know so far video, guys. It's been a while since I've done this series and I want to bring it back in 2020, and this month in January I'm going to focus on Vampire The Masquerade Bloodlines 2, because everything I have looked into this game about, all the research that I've done, this game sounds really interesting, and it's actually a game that I'm really looking forward to, that is coming out in the first quarter of 2020. So let's get to it. Without further ado, here is everything that we know so far about Vampire The Masquerade Bloodlines 2. So Vampire The Masquerade Bloodlines 2, I'm just going to call it Bloodlines 2 from now on, just to keep it nice and short and sweet, is developed by Hardsuit Labs and published by Paradox Interactive. Like I said, it is set for release in the first quarter of 2020, so that could be any time between January and maybe April, May, though we haven't had a confirmed release date as of yet. It is going to be available on the PlayStation 4, Xbox One and PC. And it is a massive action RPG set in White Wolf Publishing's world of darkness. So the game is basically based on White Wolf's tabletop role-playing game called Vampire The Masquerade. And it is actually a sequel to the 2004 video game Vampire The Masquerade Bloodlines, which became something of a cult classic, with IGN even naming it the best PC RPG of that year. And the game has been praised for its incredible narrative and also massive degree of choice. So Bloodlines 2 is setting up to be a really good sequel to the original game, and I know fans of that series are very excited to pick it up and play it. So the story follows a human in the 21st century Seattle, unlike the first game, which was set in Los Angeles. You are killed and revived as a thin blood vampire with weak vampiric abilities. The game is played from a first person perspective, alternating to third person for certain actions during the gameplay. So the game's premise, according to the official website, is the following. Enter the night as one of several humans inexplicably attacked in a mass embrace, suddenly thrown into the dangerous and ruthless vampire politics of Seattle. Tensions between the factions in Seattle are at an all-time high, and this unsanctioned attack throws the status quo into chaos. An inquest is called in order to get to the bottom of the mystery, and you're the star witness, whether you like it or not. So the game's world, the world setting and lore is really interesting. The game basically depicts a world in which vampires, werewolves, demons and other creatures shape human history. Vampires are bound by a code to maintain their secrecy, which is known as the Masquerade, by refraining from using their abilities in front of humans and engaging in unnecessary killing. There are severe punishments for breaking these laws, including banishment, and embracing, which is the turning of humans to vampires, is strictly forbidden without the permission of the leading clans and is actually punishable by death. There are 6 clans that inhabit the world, which you can choose to ally with or avoid or make your enemy. So let's delve into these clans in a little bit more detail. So firstly, we have Thin Bloods. This is what you start off as. These are a modern and weaker strain of vampires who are typically shunned and treated as lesser than full-blood vampires. Unlike full-bloods, Thin Bloods can eat human food in limited amounts and are more resistant to sunlight. We then have Toreadors. These are the closest to humanity with a passion for culture. They influence the elite, and the Toreador have been well entrenched within Seattle's power structure since its days as a pioneer settlement. They are obsessed with beauty in all forms and are incredibly charismatic. So these are the vampires that are very good at manipulating people and seducing people to conform to their will. We then have the Ventru. They are noble and powerful leaders. They have actually entrenched themselves in the businesses of the 21st century. They generally run billion-dollar corporations that shape the local and global landscape. Their lineage and loyalty are actually held in high esteem, and they're incredibly rich and incredibly powerful. We then have the Bruja. They are idealists who excel at fighting. The Bruja tend to be unaffiliated and generally gather at something called a bash, which can be loosely translated to a fight club for the undead. They tend to hire themselves as muscle for anyone who can afford them. We then have the Malkavians. These are cursed with insanity or blessed with insight, depending on your opinion. They are traditionally ostracized and nicknamed lunatics, jesters, visionaries, and madmen, though some actually call them oracles. You then have the Tremere. They are considered to be secretive and untrustworthy and wield blood magic. In their history, they were occultists seeking immortality and have actually found a way to live forever, but with a heavy price and a curse, which colours their interactions with other clans who mistrust them intrinsically. These clans are loosely united by their opposition to something called the Sabbat, and these are vampires who revel in their nature. Alongside the clans, Seattle is also broken up by 5 vampire factions, each with their own ideologies. You have the Pioneer faction. These are led by the longest reigning vampire, Prince Lou Grand. They are the oldest vampires in the city, hence the name Pioneers. They were there at the birth of Seattle. You then have the Camarilla faction. These are led by Prince Alec Cross, who have been in power for the last 2 decades, and they represent the social elite and wealthy vampires. We then have the Baron faction. They run the criminal underworld and offer less than honest work for vampires, thin bloods, ghouls, and humans. You have the Newcomers faction led by Victor Goga. They are made up of blood mages, scholars, and runaways. And you then have the Unseen factions. These are exclusive to the Nosferatu. They use hackers, journalists, and outcasts to gather intel, and they are condemned to a life in the shadows and tend to live in the sewers and underground and avoid humanity at all costs. Combined with this, you then have the Anak clan, and they are a group of idealistic vampires that are opposed to Camarilla's political structure, believing that power should be shared by all vampires. So as you can see, the lore in the world is incredibly complex. There are all these different clans, different factions that you can choose to side with, and I think the world and lore just sounds really rich and really interesting. So let's talk a little bit about the character building and customization, because of course this is an RPG. So before the game begins, players create a vampire character. So you can actually select a background which informs who they were as a human. A barrister, career criminal, coroner, police officer are just some of the choices available, with each offering different dialogue and interaction options in the game world. At the start of the game, the player assigns their character one of 3 thin blood disciplines and upgradable powers before later joining one of the 5 full blood clans and then gaining an additional 2 abilities. The 3 abilities that you can pick from at the start are Chiropteran, which is the ability to glide and summon bats, Mentalism, which is the ability to levitate objects and people, and Nebulation, which is the ability to summon mist to attack and conceal your character, and to transform into mist to move through small spaces. For me personally, the last ability sounds absolutely awesome, and that's probably going to be the one that I'm going to be picking. So let's talk about game mechanics. The game is centered around something called reactive storytelling. It is written by Brian Mitsoda, the creative mind behind the original Bloodlines, and Bloodlines 2 reacts to your every choice in a narrative where different paths and outcomes happen. So your human background, the thin blood discipline you choose, the full blood clan you join, the faction you align with, and how you maintain your humanity as a vampire all affect your playthrough. It is a huge RPG with rich lore, dialogue choices, branching storylines, and a very real decisions and alliances and consequences. We are told that the game will offer a main story campaign that will offer roughly about 30 hours worth of content, and it will also have side missions. These can be discovered through exploration and accessed from your mobile phone. You can text and interact with NPCs to obtain information leading to other missions. Player choice is obviously a huge part of the game, so you can tackle missions in a number of ways. Enemies can be dealt with either violently, with melee or ranged weapons, or just hand to hand, or your abilities. You can avoid combat through stealth, or even seduce characters and talk your way through missions. You can join multiple factions simultaneously, remain loyal, or work against them from within. Factions, interestingly, will remember your actions and may refuse to work with you depending on your actions. Let's also talk a little bit about blood, because obviously this is a vampire game, so blood is a pretty crucial part of the game. As a vampire, blood is necessary for your own survival and strength. Players can feed on living beings, taking either some or all of their blood, and blood can also be obtained from rats and blood bags. Blood can also be used strategically with something called resonance, which for me sounds really interesting. So vampires can sense resonances within blood, which indicates a person's current emotional state. So fear, desire, pain, anger, and joy. Different types of resonances will grant temporary enhancements to the player. For example, increasing their melee strength or seduction ability. Repeatedly feeding on a particular resonance can grant permanent enhancements called merits. Players can also be penalized for using certain vampiric abilities in front of witnesses. Exposing their existence eventually alerts the police and can have consequences on the world. For example, human civilians may choose to avoid the streets entirely, or the player may be hunted by other vampires. As you kill humans as well, you also lose something called human points and become closer to a mindless beast. So Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 sounds incredibly interesting. It sounds like a massive RPG. It's got a really interesting world and lore and concept. The gameplay sounds fantastic. The idea of choice and consequence sounds incredible, and I am really looking forward to it. So there is everything that we know about Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2. Let me know what you guys think of this game in the comment section below. Is it the game you're interested in? Is it a game that you're looking at picking up? What are your thoughts? Please share below. If you found this video interesting and informative, please of course hit the like button to show your support. Please comment, please share and subscribe. And of course, if you want to support the channel long term going forward, you can do that by joining the channel as a member, or you can jump across to my Patreon channel and become a member there. Anyway, hope you guys are having a great week. Take care, and as always, happy gaming. Bye guys.